Have you ever encountered someone who seems to ooze spiritual superiority? They drop mystical jargon like it's going out of style, they post endless spiritual memes and quotes, and they treat the rest of us like we're just not evolved enough to understand their lofty perspective. These are the spiritual narcissists, the gurus in their own mind, and they're doing serious damage to the very principles they claim to uphold. Even more insidious are those who don't delude themselves at all. They knowingly and deliberately misuse sacred spiritual practices to mask their own egoic agendas. These individuals are not just misguided, but actively manipulative, using the trappings of spirituality to hide their true, often deeply destructive motivations. True spirituality is not about ego or perfection, but so many people have fallen into the trap of using spiritual practices as a way to bolster their sense of self-importance. They've confused the experience of expanded awareness with the illusion of enlightenment, and in the process, they've created a spiritual hierarchy where they sit firmly at the top. This kind of spiritual arrogance, whether delusional or deliberate, is the antithesis of what the spiritual journey is really about. It's a dangerous delusion that not only holds the individual back from genuine transformation, but also poisons the well for everyone else seeking authentic growth. In this video, we're going to unpack the insidious nature of the spiritual ego and explore how to reclaim the humility and depth that true spirituality requires. Let's start by unpacking this idea of the spiritual ego. At its core, the spiritual ego is the false belief that we have somehow transcended our basic human nature, that we've moved beyond the petty concerns of the ego and now reside in a state of pure, elevated consciousness. But the truth is, the ego never really goes away. It simply takes on new, more sophisticated forms. And for many people on the spiritual path, the ego simply latches onto spiritual concepts and practices as a way to feel special, superior, and in control. They'll talk about vibrations and energetic alignment, as if they possess some secret knowledge that the rest of us mere mortals couldn't possibly understand. They'll parade around their fancy meditation cushions and designer crystals, using the trappings of spirituality to cultivate a sense of personal brand and status. And, heaven forbid you challenge their self-proclaimed wisdom, they'll quickly dismiss you as unenlightened or not ready for their level of understanding. But true spirituality isn't about perfection or pedestal-worthy enlightenment. It's about the messy, uncomfortable work of confronting our own shadows, dissolving our illusions, and embracing our essential humanity. It's about cultivating a deep well of humility, compassion, and reverence for the mystery of existence. And this brings us to another insidious manifestation of the spiritual ego. Those who believe they've already done the work, but their arrogance and lack of tangible growth tells a different story. You know the type. They'll regale you with tales of their years of meditation, their deep study of ancient texts, their pilgrimages to spiritual retreats. And they'll speak with such certainty, as if they've unlocked the secrets of the universe. But when you look at their actual lives, their relationships, their emotional well-being, something just doesn't add up. In fact, these individuals often have that one glaring area of their life that betrays the truth. A relationship with a spouse or relative that is utterly rotten, some persistent health limitation they can't seem to overcome, an inability to hold down a job or manage their finances. But rather than approach these challenges with humility and a commitment to growth, their attitude is one of entitlement, blaming, sheer anger, or victimhood and spiritual arrogance. And when these limiting circumstances come up in conversation, they might fly into a defensive rage, or they often speak about them in ways that make it abundantly clear their spiritual progress is severely limited. They'll explain their relationship troubles through the lens of petty grievances and unresolved resentments. They'll discuss their health issues with an air of helplessness and self-pity, rather than exploring how these challenges could catalyze deeper self-reflection and transformation. In these moments, the gaping chasm between their spiritual posturing and their actual inner work is laid bare. Their words and energy reveal a profound lack of acceptance, compassion, and willingness to grow beyond their own egoic conditioning. These are the cracks in the facade, the telltale signs that their supposed spiritual mastery is nothing more than a delusion. But even more insidious are those who don't delude themselves at all. They knowingly and deliberately misuse sacred spiritual practices to mask their own perverse egoic agendas. These individuals are not just misguided, but actively manipulative, using the trappings of spirituality to hide their true, often deeply destructive motivations. They'll cloak their narcissism and hunger for power in the language of enlightenment. They'll twist ancient teachings to justify their self-serving behaviors, and they'll exploit the trust and vulnerability of those seeking genuine guidance. And in the process, they do immense harm, not just to the individuals they interact with, but to the very spiritual lineages and traditions they claim to represent. It's a dangerous trap, because not only does it prevent them from making any real progress, but it also poisons the well for those around them. Their sense of spiritual superiority can be incredibly alienating and off-putting, driving people away from the very practices and teachings that could help them grow. And in the case of the manipulators, their actions can utterly shatter the faith and trust of those who look to them for guidance and support. And this phenomenon of spiritual consumerism and false enlightenment isn't limited to just the self-proclaimed gurus and meditation masters. We see it cropping up in other areas of the spiritual and wellness landscape as well. Take, for example, the world of vegetarianism and veganism. There are so many people who adopt these lifestyles not out of a genuine commitment to ethical, sustainable living, but rather as a way to signal their moral and spiritual superiority. They'll look down their nose at anyone who dares to consume animal products, as if their plant-based diet has somehow elevated them to a higher plane of consciousness. And the same goes for the yoga community. We've all encountered those yoga practitioners who seem to treat their practice as a kind of spiritual performance art. They'll strike elaborate poses, drape themselves in expensive activewear, and post endless Instagram stories of their spiritual journey, all while their actions and overall presence remain disconnected from the deeper principles of yoga. The common thread here is that these individuals are using various wellness and spiritual practices as a way to bolster their ego and sense of superiority, rather than as a genuine tool for personal growth and transformation. They're more interested in the appearance of being spiritual than in the difficult, messy work of actually walking the talk. So how do we break free from the trap of the spiritual ego, the self-delusion, and the manipulative misuse of sacred teachings? It starts with a radical commitment to self-awareness and self-honesty. We have to be willing to look at ourselves with clear eyes, to see our own patterns of ego, attachment, and resistance. We have to let go of the need to be special or superior and instead embrace the humility and vulnerability that true spirituality demands. We have to stop using spiritual concepts and practices as a way to bolster our sense of self-importance and instead allow them to soften our edges, expand our perspective, and cultivate a deeper sense of connection with all of life. And we have to be willing to do the difficult, unglamorous work of inner transformation, to face our fears, challenge our limiting beliefs, and continuously evolve our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. It's not about finding the perfect guru or the ultimate technique. It's about the daily, lifelong journey of becoming more fully human. So, if you've been struggling with your own spiritual journey, or if you've encountered the kind of spiritual narcissism, self-delusion, and manipulative behavior we've been discussing, I encourage you to take a step back and examine your own motivations and patterns. Are you approaching your spirituality with a sense of ego and entitlement? Are you hopping from one practice or teacher to the next, always searching for the next high? Or are you perhaps caught in the trap of deluding yourself, or even worse, deliberately exploiting sacred teachings for your own twisted ends? The answers to these questions may be uncomfortable, but they're essential if we want to reclaim the true depth and power of the spiritual path. Because the truth is, true spirituality is not about perfection or pedestal-worthy enlightenment. It's about the messy, difficult work of becoming more fully human, of embracing our shadows, expanding our self-awareness, and learning to love ourselves and others with ever-deepening compassion. So, here you have it. If this video resonated with you, please share it with your friends and loved ones. Subscribe to this channel for more content on reclaiming the depth and integrity of the spiritual path. And leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and perspectives on this important and often overlooked issue.